Great. Becoming an author, the path to launching your book. Okay, so the self-publishing process, it doesn't have to feel like you're in a maze. It doesn't have to feel overwhelming. So I understand that sometimes it may seem very complicated, especially when you're a first-time author. So the goal of this presentation is number one, to simplify and also to clarify the whole process so that you can make a much more informed decision as you navigate your whole self-publishing journey and what it entails. So that's what we'll be talking about is the path to launching your book and what it entails. Okay, so in this presentation, you're going to learn about the following. So you're going to learn why it's really important to release a book at some point. So why is it so important to eventually launch your own book? Secondly, you're going to learn about some of the common mistakes that lots of authors tend to fall into, so that you can avoid this mistake in your own publishing process. Thirdly, I'm going to walk you through the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing so that you have a better idea because there are different types of publishers that are out there. So it's really important to understand the two major types and the difference between the two so that you can determine which method is right for you. Okay. And next, I'm going to walk you through the different self-publishing platforms that are available to you. So what are the different self-publishing platforms that are available for you to consider? And then I'm going to reveal what the whole self-publishing process entails. So if I was looking to become a self-published author, then what's the process going to look like? What does it entail? And then I'm going to show you like what exactly makes an effective book cover because your book cover is a really crucial part of the overall equation. So I'm going to reveal to you what makes a book cover stand out, what makes it effective, so that way you can determine if your book cover is good enough. Okay. And lastly, I'll be sharing with you some really helpful success tips and best practices for authors. So by applying these tips to your overall strategy, I can almost guarantee greater results in your publishing efforts. So I've been really looking forward to this presentation. I hope you have been as well. We're going to dive right in and then we'll go into the Q&A. Okay. So why do you need to release a book? Why is it so important to release your own book at some point in your career? Why is publishing so important? Why does everyone need to consider publishing a book at some point? Or at least putting out some kind of thought leadership. So according to LinkedIn, from a B2B standpoint, 55% of decision makers of companies will use your thought leadership to determine if they will do business with you. And I'm also speaking from my own personal experience. So your thought leadership or your content is a really crucial part of the decision-making process. So a lot of times they would use your thought leadership to determine how credible you are or how competent you are, what you know based on what you write about. So that's why publishing is so important from a B2B point of view. And secondly, we know that consumers are consuming content at an unprecedented rate. So people are consuming content more than any other time in history of the internet. So according to Statista, the average person spends over 7 hours per day alone just consuming content. So by publishing your book, that would really help you to engage with these people who are consuming content on a regular basis because they can consume your content when you're online. They can consume your content when you're offline, when you're reading your physical book. They can consume your content from via ebook, from their tablets, from their mobile phones. So by producing the content to attract your ideal prospects, you can really engage with a lot more people and connect with them. And what we do know is that writing is what separates the experts from everyone else. So if you look at experts in almost any industry, one thing that sets them apart is that experts write. So experts, they always write very effectively, and that's what just differentiates them. That's what separates the experts from the rookies. So by writing your book or by publishing your thought leadership, that would really help to put you on a different level and separate you from all the others. Okay. Another thing about publishing a book is that by publishing a book, you're able to really build that trust and credibility in your space. So even if they haven't read the book, the fact that you published a book, that would really help to build that trust in your space so that your brand becomes a lot more credible. And lastly, publishing a book is a really effective lead generation tool. So the way we approach publishing is part of your overall marketing strategy. So when people read your book, they're much more likely to do business with you because they've read your book, they like it, and they trust you. So by publishing a book, it's not just about selling books, it's also about generating more leads to your business. So by publishing your thought leadership and talking about your area of expertise, that would really allow you to build that rapport, to build that credibility, and to generate a lot more leads for your business as well. So that's why you really need to release a book. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're considering publishing your first book. So here's some common mistake that a lot of people fall into. So there are certain mistakes that lots of authors tend to fall into because they don't understand the whole process of what it entails. So here's some common mistake that lots of authors tend to make. Okay, so one common mistake that lots of authors tend to make is falling victim to vanity publishers because a lot of times they don't really understand the kinds of publishers that are out there. So a lot of these publishing companies, they may not say that they're vanity publishers, but they actually are vanity publishers. So vanity publishers, these are companies that they tend to prey on authors who are naive, who don't understand. So the way vanity publishers usually operate is that they usually demand a significant amount of money up front. So they usually demand a lot of money and then they promise you all kinds of bells and whistles. They promise you all kinds of exposure for your book. But the thing about vanity publishers is that they also take the rights to your book. So you're not just paying them, but you're also giving them more royalties and you're giving them more rights to your book as well. So a lot of people they take these vanity publishers and then they end up losing control over your book and they have no idea what's going on. They become very confused. And these vanity publishers, they end up making lots of money off of these books and then the authors have no idea what's going on. So that's the thing about vanity publishers, it's basically is that they tend to demand a lot of money and they promise you lots of promotion, but they also demand more rights to your book and more royalties as well. So you're also getting paid up front and you're also getting paid the royalties and taking control over your book. So you end up losing control and you have no idea what's going on. So you have to be really careful. So you have to understand the different types of publishers that are out there. And before hiring a company, you have to be clear about the kinds of publisher that they are. Because a lot of times they may not tell you, but they may actually be vanity publishers. You may also need to do some research to see what other people have to say. So if other people are saying that they're getting scammed by this company, then most likely it means that these people are scammers. Okay, another common mistake that a lot of authors tend to make is that they're publishing with no audience, they're publishing with no network. So let's say, for example, you plan to publish your first book or your next book, but no one knows who you are. You have no network, no one knows who you are, you have no audience. So in that case, then it would be very hard to sell any books because no one knows who you are. So ideally, the way we approach publishing is that we're trying to leverage our personal brand. We're trying to leverage the audience that we've built over the long term. We're trying to leverage our credibility, and then we're using our book to enhance our brand, to strengthen our brand so that it's much more credible. So before publishing your book, it's really important to really build a network, to really build a list of people that you can promote to, so that when your book is finally launched, you would have people that you can reach out to show support, to offer resources. So if you're trying to publish a book and no one knows who you are, then I would highly recommend really taking the time to really build that network, to build that audience that you can build off of, so that you don't end up promoting to no one or to complete strangers who don't know who you are. Okay, so another common mistake that lots of authors make is a lot of times they don't network with other similar authors. So if you plan to publish a book, it's also important to network with other similar authors because a lot of these similar authors, they may have access to certain resources that could also help you as well, especially if these similar authors are successful. So by publishing a book, you can now reach out to these people and you can network with these people and you would find other collaboration opportunities. They might even agree to write a book with you or to write a forward for your book. So all these things will help to increase your chances of success. So there's a website called Goodreads, Goodreads. So on Goodreads, you can actually find other similar authors that you can network with as well. And a lot of these people, they would also be open to buying your book as well. Okay. Another common mistake that lots of authors tend to make is an inferior cover design. So when it comes to your book cover is a really crucial part of the overall process because your book cover is what determines if people would remember your book. So it's the first impression that people have when they come across your book for the first time. So your book cover, it needs to really pop. It needs to look professional. It needs to be well designed. And once you get it right once, you can use the same book cover over and over again. So your book cover, it shouldn't be cheap. It's good to really take the time to make sure that it's well put together. Because if you end up getting a cheap book cover, yeah, you might save money. If you get a cheap book cover, then you might save money, but over the long term, you're losing sales. So it's really good to make sure up front that the book cover is well designed, that it really draws people in. And we'll talk about this in more detail down the road of what makes an effective book cover. Okay, so now that we've looked at all the common mistakes that authors tend to make, let's look at the different types of publishers. So there are two main types of publishers. We have the traditional publishers, and then we have the what we call the author services companies. These are companies that offer self-publishing services. They help the author become a self-published author. So let's say so one example is Apricot Press. So we offer these author services. So let's say, for example, you look for a book cover or a proofreader or an editor. These are all forms of self-publishing. But let's start by talking about the traditional publisher. So a traditional publisher so traditional publishers, these are usually the publishers who are more well established. These are the more old school publishers. So you're probably familiar with Penguin or HarperCollins. This is what comes to mind when you think of your traditional publishers. So these are the publishers who are much more well established. They have more resources, they have more budgets, they have more credibility. So by going the traditional publishing route, these publishers would have full control over how your book is produced and how it's marketed. So they would have more control over the whole process if you go the traditional publishing route because they have more resources, they have more budget. So they would have more say over how your book is developed and marketed. Another thing about traditional publishing is that the process usually takes much longer, and a lot of times they might reject your book because these traditional publishers they see your book as an investment. So they're trying to spend money on books that they believe would be a bestseller, that have a higher chance of success. So there's usually a vetting process before they accept your book. So this process is usually long, and most of the time they may not even accept your book. So traditional publishing is a little bit harder to get to, but it also has a higher success rates because these big companies, they have all the connections and all the budget to get your book out there and they see it as an investment. Okay, another thing about traditional publishers is that they pay you more upfront, and then over the long term, they give you less royalties. So if you land a traditional publishing deal, they would pay you a significant amount of money upfront, and then they would have more control over how your book is marketed, how it's developed, how it's published. And then over time, they would have more royalties as well. So they see your book as an investment in which they're paying you and then you're taking control over the whole process. So that's how traditional publishing works. And then on the other hand, we have self-publishing, which is becoming more and more popular. So self-published authors are also called indie authors. These are independent authors. So they're taking full control over everything, over the whole process. So if you go the self-publishing route, then you would have more control over how your book is produced and how your book is marketed. So you would have more control over the whole process because you're a self-published author. Another thing about self-publishing is that you're able to publish at your own convenience. So let's say, for example, you plan to publish your book at a certain date. Then with self-publishing, you can publish whenever you want to because you have more control over the whole process. You just have to be more realistic about your timeline. So you have full control over how it's produced, how it's marketed, and also when the book is going to be released. Okay, so a lot of people they may get rejected by traditional publishers, and then they might decide to go the self-publishing route instead. And then some people they may go the self-publishing route, and then over time their book can still get picked up by traditional publishers. So sometimes you can actually do both. It just depends on what's feasible, what's doable. Another thing about self-publishing is that you pay more upfront, so you would fund everything. So you would have to fund, maybe the websites, the book cover, the editing, the proofreading. So you're going to have to fund, you're going to have everything in your control. You have full responsibility. So you would pay to fund the whole process, and then over time, you would receive most of the royalties over time. So that's the difference between the two. So by looking at these comparisons, you can now determine which of these is right for you. Traditional versus self-publishing. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're considering going the self-publishing route. In that case, then you have to consider the different platforms that are out there. So here are the different self-publishing platforms that are available to you. So the first one that we have is Amazon. So Amazon is the most popular. You're probably familiar with Amazon as well, unless you live under a rock. But Amazon KDP is a really popular self-publishing platform, Kindle Direct Publishing, that you're probably familiar with. The second platform that we'll be talking about is Ingram Spark. So Ingram Spark, they're not as popular as Amazon, but they're also pretty good as well as an alternative. Another self-publishing platform is Barnes and Noble. So I'm pretty sure you've heard of Barnes and Noble because they're pretty large, they're pretty big. And lastly, we have Apple Books. So let's say, for example, you just want to publish an ebook. In that case, then you might also consider Apple Books as well. So these are the different self-publishing platforms that are available to you. Okay, so let's talk about each of them one by one, starting with Amazon, KDP. Okay, so Amazon is the largest publisher for self-published ebooks. So they offer both ebook and paperback, but they are the largest when it comes to ebook. They're also starting to offer a hard copy as well. Okay, so one thing about Amazon is that they have an expanded distribution program. So with their expanded distribution program, you're able to reach more bookstores. So your book becomes available to more bookstores. So their expanded distribution is actually free to use and it's actually easy to sign up. So with your expanded distribution program, your book would be available to a lot more bookstores. So it doesn't guarantee that all the bookstores will accept your book. It just guarantees that your book would be available to these bookstores. So some of them would accept your book and some of them will not. Next, another thing about Amazon is that, so with Amazon, you can expect a royalty rate of about 60%. So you would take the 60% and then you would subtract the shipping and the printing costs to get a better idea of the kinds of royalties to expect for your printed book. And so but for ebooks, they have a 35% option and a 70% option. So the option that you choose depends on what you're eligible for. So you would have to look at the details to determine if your book is eligible for the 70% option. Another thing about Amazon is that with Amazon, you're able to publish for free. So Amazon is actually free to use. So they're doing you a favor. So with Amazon, you can publish for free. The only time you would pay them is if you want them to help you with your marketing. But for the most part, you're publishing for free. Another thing about Amazon KDP is that with them, you get a free ISBN and barcode. So a lot of people like this factor. But the thing about the free ISBN from Amazon is that your free ISBN can't be used outside of Amazon. So if you use your free ISBN, then you could only use it on your platform. You can't use it outside of Amazon. So let's say, for example, you only plan to publish on Amazon. In that case, then you would probably use your ISBN for free because you're only publishing on your platform. But if you plan to sell your book on multiple platforms, or you want to be able to, or if you want to sell your book on your website as well, in that case, then you would probably get your own ISBN as well. And also, if you plan to publish multiple books, so if you plan to release more than one book, then in that case, then you would definitely get your own ISBN because you'd usually have a set of multiple ISBNs for future books in different formats. So ideally, you would have an ISBN for the different formats that you're publishing your book in. So you would have one for paperback, you would have one for hard copy. So different ISBN for different formats and different styles. Okay, so that's pretty much how it works. Okay, so next we'll talk about Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark. So a lot of people haven't heard of Ingram Spark, but Ingram Spark is owned by Ingram Content Group. So Ingram Content Group is one of the world's biggest book distributors. It's actually the biggest book distributor. So they're pretty large, they're pretty big. They're a pretty big deal. So one thing about Ingram Spark is that with Ingram Spark, you get higher quality printing. But this is debatable because not everyone likes Ingram, but a lot of people feel like their printing is of a good quality. That's also because of their background in prints. So with Ingram Spark, they have a background in print. So their printing is usually of a higher quality. So let's say, for example, you want to have like a really fancy book cover with nice textures and things. In that case, then Ingram Spark would be perfect for you. Another thing about Ingram is that you have a larger variety of sizes. So let's say you want your book to be printed in a certain size that's not available on Amazon. In that case, that you would probably consider Ingram because they have a larger variety of sizes for you to choose from. Okay. So one thing about Ingram is that their print royalties are determined by so many different factors. So their royalties are more complicated. So it's determined by the book size, the page counts, so many different factors. So to determine the royalties to expect, you would have to use a calculator on their website. If you want to see the calculator, you can get back to me later and I can send you the link. But they have a calculator where you can calculate the kinds of royalties to expect for your book. So for Ingram Spark, you can expect a royalty rate of about 40% for ebooks. So ebooks are much more simple, so you know what to expect. So they would probably offer you about a 40% royalty rate for your ebook. And then one thing about Ingram is that Ingram Spark isn't free to use. So unlike Amazon, with Ingram Spark, they charge a $49 fee for print an ebook. But if you only plan to publish an ebook, then this costs $25. So they charge you to publish on their platform. Ingram Spark is also an annual subscription. So there's an annual fee of $12 to publish on Ingram Spark. So you would expect to pay the annual fee of $12, and then you would have to pay the $49 for your print and ebook to be published on their platform. So that's how Ingram Spark works. Okay. And lastly, one thing about Ingram Spark is that they offer both a free and a paid ISBN. So they offer both a free and a paid ISBN. So, for example, if you were to use their free ISBN, then your free ISBN can only be used on their platform. So it can only be used on Ingram Spark. So you can't use it. So let's say, for example, you only plan to publish on Ingram Spark. In that case, then you can't really use it outside of their platform. But let's say, for example, you want to be able to publish on multiple platforms. In that case, then with Ingram Spark, you would have a discount on your ISBN. So usually ISBNs cost hundreds of dollars, but with Ingram Spark, you can just get one ISBN at a discounted rate of about $85. And that's what it entails. So they have a free option and they have a paid ISBN as well. So with a paid ISBN, you would still have full ownership over your book and you would be able to publish on multiple platforms as well. But you would have it at a discounted rate. That's how Ingram Spark works. Okay. Next, okay, so let's talk about Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble Press. So Barnes and Noble is pretty large. So Barnes and Noble is actually so Barnes and Noble is an American bookseller with the largest number of retail outlets. So they have the largest number of retail outlets in the US. So they're pretty large. They're a pretty big deal. You've definitely heard of them. So one thing about Barnes and Noble is that they allow you to set up pre-orders. So sometimes I come across authors who they want to set up pre-orders for their books. So you can't really do that with Amazon because Amazon, they want to be known for shipping, for fast shipping. But with Barnes and Noble, you can set up pre-orders in the meantime while your book is being developed. So that's one unique benefit is the pre-orders that they allow you to set up. Another thing about Barnes and Noble is that their print royalties cost about 55%. So you would take the 55% and then you would subtract the printing cost to get a better idea of the kinds of royalties to expect. Another thing about Barnes and Noble is that their ebooks offer a 70% royalty rate. So that's pretty generous. So you can expect a royalty rate of about 70% for their ebooks. And also, they're pretty fast and easy to use. So obviously, this is debatable. Some people may find them difficult, but a lot of people feel like they're fast and easy to use. So that these are the main perks that come with Barnes and Noble, if you want to consider them as part of your overall strategy. And lastly is the free ISBN as well. So just like Amazon and Ingram, they also offer a free ISBN that you can use on your platform. Okay. And lastly, we have Apple Books. Apple Books. So Apple Books is the largest ebook marketplace in the US. So they're pretty big, they're pretty popular. So they're the second largest ebook marketplace. So with Apple Books, you can expect a royalty rate of about 70%, paid 30 days at the end of the month of the sale. So let's say, for example, you you sell a book in, let's say, for example, you sell a book in March. In that case, then you would receive your royalties 30 days after the end of March. So let's say probably at the end of April, perhaps. So you can expect about 70% royalties for your ebook on Apple Books. Another thing about Apple Books is that they only accept EPUB formats. So there are different formats of ebook. So before publishing ebook, you have to be clear about the different kinds of formats that there are. So Amazon, they have their own official formats of ebook. They have their own official formats that can't be used outside of Amazon. So if you want to sell your ebook on multiple platforms, then you have to use the EPUB formats because that format is a lot more popular. It could be published on Apple Books and other platforms as well. So Apple Books only accepts EPUB. Another thing about Apple Book is that you will need a MacBook. So you would need a MacBook to be able to effectively publish your book on Apple Books. So if you don't have a MacBook, then you might not really be eligible for this platform. And lastly, no extra delivery fees. So with Apple Books, there are no extra delivery fees involved. So it's pretty simple to set up. Okay, so now that we've looked at some of the main publishing platforms, so like I said, there are other publishing platforms that are out there like Drafted Digital, but in this presentation, I just looked at a few of them that are pretty popular. Okay, so let's talk about the self-publishing process. So what does the self-publishing process entail? What does the self-publishing process entail? So there are different parts that make up the overall self-publishing. So let's say, for example, you want to publish your first book or your next book. So I would probably recommend that you start by maybe just doing some research, looking at other similar books that are out there as well. You could also start, just throwing your ideas out, just very rough ideas. There are also publishing coaches who can coach you through the whole process of developing your book. So once you have your rough manuscript, you can now start the editing phase. So there are different parts of the editing phase. So for example, we have developmental editing. That's when we're trying to edit the structure of the book to make sure that it's structurally sound. Because your book, it needs to be like a bestseller. It needs to be very well put together. It needs to be professionally done. So developmental editing deals with the development of your book, making sure that it's really well put together so that it's structurally sound. And then we also have the copy editing and line editing. So that refers to when we're going through the different parts of the book, the different sections, the different lines to make sure that everything makes sense. Everything has to be well put together. And then when we start proofreading, we're looking for grammar errors, we're looking for spelling errors. So we just need to make sure that the book is really well put together, and we have to polish it to make sure that it's really sound like a best-selling book. And then we have the design phase. So these different phases, they're not in a sequential order. They can actually happen at the same time. So you could actually develop the interior layout. I mean, you could actually develop the cover while the book is being proofread as well. So sometimes they could intersect, but basically the design phase refers to when you're developing the book cover, your interior layout. So all these things need to be well put together because the cover, it needs to draw attention, and the interior layout needs to ensure a great reading experience. So it needs to be formatted for ebook, for paperback. All these things are really important as part of the design and formatting phase. We also have the promotion phase. So we have to get your book out there. So you need to have a plan as to how your book could be promoted. So for example, do you have a website? Do you have an email marketing tool? These are all ways to get your book out there. And then there are also other technicalities that are associated with publishing. So, for example, you might need to buy your own ISBN, or you might need to buy an LCC. Not buy it; it's actually free, but you might need to get an LCCN. So the LCCN refers to Library of Congress Control Number. So it's part of the overall self-publishing process. So you will need to submit your book to the Library of Congress, so that way it becomes more official. So all these things are part of the whole process. You would also probably need to maybe do some keyword research to look at the kinds of keywords that your book can rank for to improve your chances of getting discovered. These are all the small technicalities that are related to publishing your book. Or you might need to reach out to other contributors. You might need to find someone to write a foreword or to write reviews. These are all the technicalities that are related to publishing your book. So after looking at these phases, you would now have like a better idea of what the process may entail. So now that we've looked at the self-publishing phases, let's talk about book covers, my favorite topic. So your book cover is one of the most important parts of the whole self-publishing process because your book cover is the first thing that people see when they come across your book for the first time. So it's the first thing that people see. So it needs to really draw attention. It's the first thing that people remember when they think about your book. So it needs to really help to sell your book as effectively as possible. So we need to think about what makes an effective book cover. So what makes a book cover effective? So one thing that makes an effective book cover is that it needs to have a really strong focal point. So when people look at your book cover, where's your eye being drawn to? What is it about your book that draws the eye? So maybe, for example, your book has really good contrast. That would really help to draw people's eyes in. So it needs to have a really strong focal point. There has to be something about it that can draw attention in. So where is the focal point? That would really help to make the book cover more effective. Another thing that makes an effective book cover is that it needs to fit the genre and the category because different books, they all have different genres have different expectations as to how a book cover is supposed to look. So the way you design a nonfiction business book, a self-help business book, is very different from how you would design a book that's much more spiritual. So different genres, they all have different styles and expectations. So if your book is a nonfiction business book, then it needs to look like a best-selling nonfiction business book. It shouldn't look like a romantic novel or a children's book. So it needs to really fit the genre and the category. So if you look at the different categories and genres, you will notice certain patterns. So there are certain things that they tend to have in common. So let's say, for example, you're publishing a memoir. So if you look at memoirs, you would see that different memoirs, they all have certain styles. So for example, they might use a baby picture of the author on the memoir. The reason why they do that is because that's what's helping to sell the book. Because when people see the cute baby, that would really help to draw attention and create that intrigue because people love babies. That's why they use their baby picture. But if you look at memoirs for celebrities, let's say it's a memoir for for maybe Barack Obama. So people who are very big, they tend to use their grown-up picture. The reason why they do that is because people would recognize who they are. So the celebrity's picture is what helps to sell the book cover. So the reason why they're doing these things is because that's what's selling. So different genres, they all have different styles, different practices, different approaches. So it's really important to make sure that your book cover is able to meet the genre expectations. Okay, another thing that makes an effective book cover is that it needs to convey the emotion and themes in a simple way. So when we look at our book and the emotions and the themes behind the book, we can now think of how can we communicate these things in a simplified way that has a strong focal point that draws the eye. So how can we convey the emotions and themes in a simplified way? That would really help to make the book cover much more effective. Okay, another thing that makes an effective book cover is the good use of space. The good use of space. So an effective book cover, it shouldn't look too busy. It shouldn't be all over the place. It needs to be visually balanced. It needs to have a good use of space, good hierarchy to really draw attention to the most important things. So it's really important for the book cover to not be too busy. It needs to have a really good use of space so that people can really absorb what they're looking at so that it draws more attention. Because if you have too many different things on your book cover, then you end up not drawing attention because you have too many things going on. But if you just have a few things or just one thing drawing attention, then your book cover is more likely to draw attention to that one thing because the way people think is we could only focus on the one thing at a time. We don't want to focus on multiple things. So your book cover, it shouldn't look too busy. It needs to have a good use of space with a clear hierarchy. Another thing that makes an effective book cover is that it's scalable. So your book cover, it has to be scalable because a lot of times when people come across your book cover, it will be at a small size. So they may see it in the Amazon search or they might see it in the Google search next to other books. So your book cover, it needs to really pop, even if it's at a very small size. It needs to pop at a small size so let's say, for example, you have two different book covers and you're trying to decide on which book cover is best for you. In that case, that you could look at them both at a smaller size to determine which of them pops more at a smaller size, which of them is more legible at a smaller size. So that would really help to determine which book cover is more effective. Okay, so now that we've looked at what makes a book cover effective, here are some final success tips for upcoming authors. So here are some success tips that you can apply to your overall strategy. Okay, so before publishing a book, I would highly recommend that you study the reviews of other similar books and bestsellers in your genre. So by looking at the reviews of other similar books, that will give you a better idea of what other people are doing right and what other people are doing wrong. Because when you look at these reviews, you will notice the positive reviews and the good things that people are saying about the book. And we want them to say these things about our book as well. So by looking at the positive reviews, you can apply it to your book. And also by looking at the negative reviews, you can now avoid the mistakes that other authors are falling into. So sometimes these negative reviews are just people who are angry and very critical. Sometimes they just don't like the author. But sometimes the negative reviews are constructive criticisms. So sometimes they actually make lots of sense. They're saying things that make sense. So by looking at the constructive criticisms, you can now apply it to your own book and avoid the same thing that other authors are falling into. So it's really important to consider the reviews of other similar books and bestsellers in your genre. Okay, another thing to consider is the pricing strategy. So when you're trying to decide on the pricing strategy, you have to consider other similar books when deciding on your pricing because the way you would price if your book is too expensive, then that would cost you lots of sales over the long term. So the challenge is to make sure that the book is not too expensive and then the book is not too cheap. So we have to find the right balance. So by looking at other similar books, we can now decide on the right pricing strategy. Okay, another success tip is to create a reader magnet and build your email list. So a reader magnet is similar to a lead magnet. So a reader magnet is kind of like a free offer that you provide to your potential readers. So it's a free offer that's designed to attract your ideal readers. So, for example, it could be a free webinar, it could be a preview of the book, it could be a PDF with helpful content that's related to the book. These are all ways to attract more of your ideal reader. So, by offering this reader magnet, that would really help you to build your list of potential buyers over time, to really build that email list of people. Okay, another success tip is to really take the time to create a conversation around your book. So when you look at your book and the key themes, you can now create a conversation around it. And from these conversations, we can now come up with ideas for social media content. It could be ideas for a webinar, for an event, based on these conversations around your book. So your book, it needs to be flexible enough for people to create a conversation around it that's very interesting. That way we could attract more people to the conversation. It could even be a conversation for a podcast interview. These are all great things to add to your marketing. Okay, another step to take is to develop eye-catching marketing pieces with consistent visuals. So how do you plan to market your book? So ideally, you would need some marketing pieces to really help to draw attention. So let's say, for example, you plan to speak at events. In that case, then you might need a pop-up banner. You might need some brochures. You might need some bookmarks. So all these things need to be consistent with your brand, and all these things need to really pop. It needs to really stand out as more clean, more professional. Even your website is part of your marketing kit. So you might need a website or a landing page. All these things need to tie in with the overall narrative. All these things need to really stand out. Okay, next is we need to reach out to these podcast hosts. So once your brand looks really professional, you have an eye-catching marketing kit, you have a website that pops, and your brand looks more professional, you can now reach out to these podcast hosts, and you'll be amazed at who would agree to have you on their show. It doesn't even have to be a podcast host. It could be a radio show host or a talk show host, but you'll be amazed at who would agree. You just have to approach them in the right way, and your brand needs to look professional. It needs to pop. And also, if you have an email list, then they're much more likely to have you on their show, because when people invite you to their show, they see it as a collaboration. So they're inviting you to their shows because you're thinking that you're going to promote the show with them. So when they invite you to their show, you have to promote the show with them. You have to promote it together. So they're looking for people who have something to say that will be beneficial. And also you're looking for people who have a good audience. So if you have a good audience and your brand looks professional and you have something to say that's beneficial, then it's just a matter of reaching out to these people effectively, and you'll be amazed at who would agree. And the thing about these podcast hosts is that a lot of them, they're very helpful. So they're very supportive of your book. Sometimes they might share it with their audience. They might even buy a copy for themselves. They might endorse it. They might invite you for another interview. They might refer you to others. So it's really important to build a relationship with these podcast hosts, because a lot of people, they just go on the podcast and then they just disappear after the podcast. They don't keep in touch with the host. They don't promote the interview. So it's not enough to just go to an interview. You have to promote the interview, and you have to keep in touch with the podcast host. You could even pitch ideas to them for new interviews or events. You can pitch ideas to them, and they're much more likely to agree. And next is to build a list of potential partners. So when you work with these podcast hosts, they're kind of like your partners. So you have to build a list of people who you can work with. So it could be a list of podcast hosts, a list of events planners, a list of other experts in your field, a list of bloggers. These are all people who can help you to get your book out there, to invite you to speak on your platform, because they're partnering with you. So once you have a list of potential partners, then it's just a matter of reaching out to them in an effective way, because most people, they don't reach out to them in an effective way. So that's why they don't get invited. So you have to reach out to them in an effective way, and then you would see that a fraction of them would agree to have you on their platform or to partner with you. Okay. And last but not least, you have to speak at more events. So event speaking is a huge part of personal brand building today. So you have to be open to speaking at more events. It could be a physical event, or it could be a virtual events. But you have to reach out to these event planners and these organizers to speak at more events. And by collaborating with these partners, this would open the door to more events for you to speak on. And when you speak on these events, you're able to really build credibility with the audience. And then they're much more likely to buy your book because they heard you talk, and they're much more likely to buy your book. So events should definitely be a key part of your overall strategy. But one final piece that I would say is that, so when it comes to publishing a book, success isn't measured in terms of only book sales. So success could also mean, let's say, for example, you get invited to speak at more events. That's also another way to measure success of your book, by being invited to speak at big events. Another measure of success could be, let's say, for example, your book attracts a high ticket client to your business. So let's say a high ticket client read your book and now they want to work with you or partner with you. These are all ways to measure success. So it's not just about your book sales, it's also about the business that you're able to generate from your book as well, and the opportunities that it attracts to your business. So I would definitely say good luck, and let's dive into the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to put your hands up in the chat and just let us know your question, and I'll be happy to answer. Okay, okay. So who would like to go first? Does anyone have any question? Okay, so I see Daryl WMS Dotson. Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, Daryl, let me see. Daryl WMS Dotson. Okay, so you should be able to unmute it.
Okay, I had a hard time trying to unmute, but
Okay,
hopefully you can hear me now.
yeah.
My first question is, what would be the first step that a person that is not a writer, but has been keeping like a journal on their journey through this architectural, because I'm an architect, this architectural arena. And it's not a self-taught type book. I want it to be more of a funny type book. What would be the first step? I know you said read some other books that might be similar, but what would be for the first step after you think you've gotten everything in there? Would it be to have someone now proofread it, or to see if they could bring it together where it does perform the way you're trying to
Yeah, absolutely.
trying
So
to
once you
do?
have, yeah, so once you have that rough manuscript, you can now start perhaps maybe speaking to an editor just to polish up the book a little bit more to make sure that it's more professional. Yes. Hello?
Okay, okay, all right. Okay, and like you said, so to find an editor that would be more inclined to read your book, how do you go about doing that? Is that through these other book clubs that you mentioned?
Okay, so the places that I mentioned, those are publishing platforms. So
Right.
they don't offer editing services.
Okay.
And
Where will we find editors?
yeah, so it's pretty simple. So, I have editors, or even LinkedIn, you can find editors on LinkedIn as well. Um, so there are people who could edit your book, and I even have a network of editors, that I can refer you to. So it's pretty simple to find editors. But one thing that I would recommend is using an editor who has done similar books in the past, because the way you would edit a nonfiction book is very different from how you would edit a fiction novel. So you would probably need an editor that has done like the same genre in the past. Yeah.
Okay. So will that person be like a co-writer or something when if they
No,
added
no.
it?
If someone wants to edit your book and the person wants to be a co-writer, then you would probably want to be careful about that person because So you just
Okay.
need to pay attention to the details in terms of what they're saying. So if you plan to do self-publishing, then you're taking full control of the whole process. So you just need to determine the even alignable. I'm pretty sure we have some editors here. So just to polish the book to make sure that it's up to par with what is out there. And then you could also do some research yourself, because if your book is very bad, then it's going to cost more to edit. So if your book is decent, it's going to cost less. So you might also do some research, maybe polish it up yourself a little bit, look at other similar books, and then you can,
Okay.
yeah, find editors as well. So editors, they have like different budget ranges. So ideally, if it's someone that's been editing for very long, then they're gonna charge a lot more, but they would also do probably a better job. Or you could just find someone who's maybe doesn't have that many years. Maybe someone who's fresh out of college or something, who still has writing skills, and have you just have to consider. So like ideally, the people who you hire should be people who were referred by others. So you could also ask people in your network to refer an editor to you. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, so who would like to go next? I see Daryl WMS Dotson.
That was me.
Oh, okay. All right, I see the Right Warrior.
Okay, I'm just unmuting. Blessings all. Happy Tuesday. It's the last day of National Poetry Month, so kudos to everyone who writes poetry or enjoys it. I just want to say, Eddie, fantastic session. Whenever I can, I try to hop in. I'm a published editor and have my own publishing house as independent, but these conversations don't happen often enough. And I love what you said about authors, right? Like talk to other authors. Like they are such a great resource. When I started my journey in 2020, it's because I spoke to like over a dozen different authors, both traditional and independent, that I've realized what I want to do for myself and the process to publish my own book. So that's fantastic. It's a great point. Talk to other authors. They are everywhere. TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, like just have conversations. A lot of us as authors, we sometimes have like, a 50-minute scheduler. You can talk to us real quick or just in passing or in an audio room, like on Clubhouse or fan base, and just ask you questions. So kudos. Talk to other authors is a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely network with other authors, especially similar authors, right? To get a sense of their experience too. Because they may have also made some mistakes that weren't even mentioned in this call. So
Tons of mistakes.
yeah.
Tons of mistakes. But yeah,
Yeah,
we're better for it.
absolutely. Okay, so who would like to go next?
I'll
Okay,
go. You
okay.
mentioned lead magnet, and I
Yeah.
want to know what that looks like in practice and like how does that work and function in the world of publishing?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So a lead magnet is kind of a free resource that you're offering to attract your ideal readers. So let's say, for example, I'm writing a book on wellness, living a healthy lifestyle. In that case, then I might release a lead magnet. So this could be like a short PDF, maybe like 2 pages, that just provides people with wellness tips, healthcare tips. And then when you drive people to these lead magnets, you will see that a lot of them would opt in to subscribe. And then they would provide your email address in exchange for the lead magnet. And then you can keep in touch with them so that when the full book is released, you have people that you can promote to, because these are people who are much more likely to buy your book because they've already expressed interest in that topic. So your lead magnet, it could just be like a simple 1 page PDF or 5 pages or 2 pages. It could also be a free webinar, or it could be, let me see, yeah, it's just about being creative about it. You've probably come across a lead magnets, but you didn't know that that's what it was, because I see them all the time. So these are like the best practices, just offering a lead magnet, and then you would see that your email list would grow much more quickly, and you cannot keep in touch with these people. It could also be a preview from your book. So your lead magnets could be like a short preview from the book to attract these people. You know, the thing is that it just needs to convey value. There has to be something about it that entices them. So let's say if, for example, you're offering tips or helpful insights, that could really help to attract your ideal readers. Yeah. Do you understand or
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
I'm writing stuff down, but yeah, that makes sense. A short PDF, like a preview of book or tips or tricks related to your book, so you can draw them in, and they can give you your email, and you can keep in contact with them over and over again. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So the one thing about lead magnets is that they only work when you're getting traffic. So for example, if no one is coming to your websites, then offering a lead magnet won't really help. So it only works when you're getting lots of traffic. So let's say, for example, you have a blog post that's getting lots of views every day. In that case, then by offering a lead magnet, you will see that a lot of them would subscribe to it to learn more. Or some people also run Facebook ads. So let's say, for example, you don't have that much traffic coming to your website, then you could use Facebook ads to attract more people to the lead magnet, and then you can now keep in touch with them in preparation for the release. Yeah. Okay, so who would like to go next?
I'll go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks for this awesome webinar. Um, yeah, so I've been someone that's been writing for a decade
Okay.
and I feel behind schedule with at least 2 books I wanted to get out. This information is very, very helpful. A lot of things that you brought out um, are very crucial. As far as I'm thinking about the marketing, because marketing and building a network is just critical in everything, even in building your business. So I'm really, looking at that piece. I think one of the things that I was thinking about in writing, like, would you suggest, because I've been writing, writing on paper, writing on paper. Is there a better way to get your information down, like, via a video recorder? Or should everything be handwritten or typed or whatever? I'm just kind of wonder, can you speak your thoughts of your book on some other apparatus other than just constantly writing, okay, this is not working, I'm gonna ball this up and start over with this context? Just kind of wanted to ask you that part first.
Yeah, sure. So it all just depends on what's feasible for you. But I would say writing is probably the most effective way. I know writing can be very stressful, but the way I approach writing is it's kind of like exercise. So at first it might seem very stressful, but over time, you get better at it and then it gets easier as well. But yeah, writing is pretty much the main way to approach it, unless you want to have a ghostwriter and work with someone else to write it for you, or have a writing coach. That's another option.
Mm,
But that's pretty much what it boils down to. Or you could also record yourself, but that could also take more time. So
okay.
yeah.
Well, one other thing that I liked as well, because the first book that I started writing, it was just too much. And it was so much in what I was writing. I got bored, I got tired. So I decided to make a short book from that. And I decided that I wanted to put more colors and pictures. Instead of having this long, big book, it's 6 short stories, kind of like with a spiritual self-help base, kind of like parable style. So I've changed how I write because I'm a writer. I mean, I'm a therapist and I'm used to talking with people and all that type of stuff. So I've had to condense it down as well, but I feel like colors and just shorter context would be better. So I
Mhm.
do agree with some of the, a lot that you said, but I can definitely testify that if it's too wordy, it's too much. If you're tired of reading it, somebody else is going to get tired of reading it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, what genre is it?
So once again, I have like 6 different short stories that I'm writing on. Most of it is self-reflection on some type of um, something to help you really deal with soul searching,
Yeah, sure.
with issues. Like, I have, something I'm writing on deception, distortion, kind of what that looks like, in a context and different, and something that might be going on in your life. So, one of the stories, it's like parable style,
Yeah, sure.
something, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what it's like. Self-help, spiritual meaning, definitely God connected, because that's who I am. And we'll see how it comes out, but I've definitely shortened the book.
Yeah, sure. So writing is kind of like so when you're writing a book, right, it's both an art form and it's also kind of a business as well. So it's an art form because it's a form of expression, so it's how you're expressing yourself, you're telling your story. So it's an art form in that regard. So it's all based on your experiences and what you're comfortable with. But it's also a business in the sense that you're also considering like what's more likely to sell. So you might need to do some research, look at other similar books, things like that. And like, you're also considering like strategies to increase your chances of selling so that way you could alleviate, some of the costs that are associated with publishing the book. So so by approaching it both ways, that would really allow you to leverage, the whole publishing process to also benefit your business and your brand as well. So that way you could build, really build more trust, in your space, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so many books out there, Eddie. It's just like, wow, everybody has something that they want to get out there. And you're right. It's like, how do I get my book in the world to hear my voice? But you know what? I've come to terms with learning from a coach. My coach is that your voice is to reach certain people. It may not reach everyone, you know, but there's so many books out there, especially in how I'm writing, in the style that I'm writing in. So I am going to have to do a lot of research and look at a lot of other authors and things like that. That was really good feedback there. So I'm going to go on and mute my mic now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so who would like to go next? I see the right warrior again.
Yeah, I was just gonna hop in with some encouragement for the young lady who was just speaking. One of the things I always say, when you go into the bread aisle of a supermarket, every other week is like a new bread company is stuffing their breads in between the other breads, right? So it doesn't matter how many breads there are, people are still making bread, people are still buying bread. That's how books are. If you can sell your book to 50 people, that's how you start, right? It doesn't matter who else has it or whatever else is happening. If you have grandkids, for example, and you want to do a children's book for them, if you get some sales, cool. But your goal is to get a book in hand that you can give to your grandchildren and just run with it. Have a great plan. Eddie is great with the branding and he's showing all the steps. Don't be afraid. If writers were afraid, there would be no Shakespeare, there would be no Romeo and Juliet, there'd be no Khalil Gibran, the Maya Angelou's if we were afraid. And there definitely would have been no James Baldwin's if we were afraid. Don't be afraid, just go for it. Kudos to
Yeah,
you.
absolutely, absolutely. Yo, so publishing a book is a huge accomplishment. I would admit it. So if any of you on this call has published a book, I say kudos to you. Congratulations. Because that's a huge milestone in your career. Because it's not an easy thing to do, but it definitely pays off. Okay, so who would like to, does anyone like to go, would anyone like to go next? Or let me see. Anyone else? Okay, let me look at the chat. I think I see a few questions. Okay, so someone asked about copywriting. Okay, so when it comes to copywriting, so copywriting is one of the technicalities that are related to publishing a book. I didn't cover it in this call because we didn't have enough time. But if you follow up with me, I can show you the link of where to go to copyright your work. It usually costs around $40 roughly, but there's a website that you would go to register the copyright. Okay, what else? Someone else said, let me see. Um, okay, someone else asked about draft to digital. Yeah, draft to digital is a whole different ball game. We didn't even have enough time to cover that. So there are lots of other publishing platforms, But in this call, I just spoke about a few of them. But there are definitely another platform to consider. Okay. Does anyone else have any final questions before we get off? Let me see. Anyone else?
Eddie, where's your contact information?
Okay, I put it in the chat, but I can put it again right now just so you have it. So you can find me online at apricotbranding.com. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook at apricotbranding.
Okay.
So it's all consistent across the different channels on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or you can connect with me on Alignable as well. So if you want to learn more about the whole publishing process. I also have lots of helpful resources on my website. So if you're an upcoming author, you might find some blog articles that walk you through the different publishing platforms or provide you with marketing tips.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so yeah. So remember to save the chat. So if no one else has any questions, then I just want to say thanks to y'all for joining us this
A
afternoon.
question.
Okay.
What is the amount of pages for a autobiography? I recommend it.
Well, there isn't really a recommended number of pages for an autobiography. Yeah, there's not really a recommended number. I think it's more of the quality over the quantity. You know, so if
Okay.
it has lots of pages, but it's really, really good, then people would be excited about it. But you don't have to have so many pages, right? You could consider dividing the book into like different releases so that way you could sell more books because you're selling two at a time, two at a time. So if you have a book that's too large, you can divide it into and release the second part later. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. All right then. Any final questions? Let me see. Anyone else? Okay. Let me see. All right. So yeah, so if no one else has any questions, I just want to say thanks to you all for joining us this afternoon. And I really hope you can make it to our next event. So I really thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Bye-bye. Okay.